So I thought maybe we could talk a little bit about the situation with generation, with electric generation and what's going on there, and how things are changing with the data centers and large loads coming in, how we think they may change in the future with AI and where that's going. So, do you want to talk a little bit about
Yeah,
that?
sure. I think right now this topic is the most important topic happening in Annapolis.
Right.
As the viewers know, I'm SMECO's registered lobbyist in Annapolis. The General Assembly meets every year from January through April. And this year, the focus on energy is unprecedented. And there's a couple reasons for that, largely because of the lack of in-state generation that we have here in Maryland.
Right. We
And
actually already import 40% of the power that comes
right,
into the
so
state.
so we import a large percentage of the power, and what all of this has come to this perfect storm has resulted in higher energy prices.
Right.
And those higher prices that utilities are paying are translating into higher bills for our customers here in SMECO and then across the state. So what do I mean by in-state generation? So when we have these power plants that are producing electricity in the state, it is beneficial for us because it's what we call localized generation. That it's closer to us. We don't have to transmit it as far, which raises prices. And the other aspect of it is it creates jobs in our community,
Right.
and it is providing that base load generation. So what has happened over the past several years? There have been closing of some significant power plants. Two of
Mostly
them,
coal, right? Coal
yeah,
plants.
two coal plants that have closed, and I think you'll hear a couple different explanations for that. One is economics.
Mhm.
The coal generated energy was too expensive as compared to natural gas,
Right.
and then there was the environmental aspect that Maryland had passed some laws that required certain upgrades to be made and various other clean air standards that made these very older coal plants very difficult to be in compliant.
Mhm.
So the combination of those economic and political environmental aspects have led to these closures, and we're starting to feel that pain now.
Right.
And I think what's happening in Annapolis right now is a very difficult debate about how to incentivize new generation to come to the state of Maryland.
Right.
And I think what lawmakers are challenged with right now is creating an environment where for-profit businesses, these folks who build power plants, want to compete and build stuff here in Maryland.
Mhm.
And Maryland has made a big push for what are called small modular reactors. Those are nuclear
Right.
facilities.
Right.
So you know more about that than I do, and I'll kind of turn it over to you after that. But they also are opening the door for new natural gas plants. And that has created a problem with environmental folks
Right.
who want Maryland to be no dependence on fossil fuels.
Right.
So you have this kind of collision of priorities that are happening right now. And oh, by the way, Maryland has renewable energy goals that are still in place
Mhm.
to incentivize solar and wind projects that those aren't going away either.
Right.
So in the next 40 or so days, or between now and April of the 11th, I believe it is, there's a lot of these major issues that are going to have to be discussed and worked out.
Right.
So, Sonia, as CEO of SMECO, when when you think about the generation deficit that we have here, explain to folks why this is so important to us.
Well, it's important because the demand for electricity is just increasing. It's increased exponentially. And some of that is from large loads. Everybody talks about data centers, so some of that is from data center load. But also with Maryland's goals, they want to electrify everything. So that's just adding more on top of it. Plus, we have electric vehicles that are coming in. So I guess what I'm trying to say is the demand for electricity has just kind of skyrocketed over the last couple of years. And when you don't have enough supply to handle that demand, then what happens? Prices go up,
Prices
right?
go up. Supply and demand.
Exactly. So the last capacity auction, which we have to participate in as a member of the PJM, the prices were really expensive. And they're hoping to incentivize some building of generation through those prices, because those capacity costs go to the generator. But load has to pay that. And what I mean by load is you and me and every other customer that takes electricity. So those costs continue to go up. They'll probably go up even a little bit more over the next 2 to 5 years until we can get some additional generation. And as far as my philosophy is, you need a mix of generation. I'm all about the environment. I'm all about it, and I know that one day we can get there where we can use all renewables. But we're not there yet, and we're not going to be there, in my opinion, in the next 5 or 10 years, perhaps. So we're going to need some of this baseload generation, and by baseload I mean dispatchable generation. And what I mean by that is you can't dispatch a solar facility and you can't dispatch a wind facility, because it doesn't generate electricity unless the sun's shining at the solar farm or the wind's blowing at the wind farm. So the next thing that needs to happen is the industry needs to come up with a viable storage option.
Right.
Whether battery storage, there's all different types of storage. So that needs to be worked out in order, so when the sun is shining, we can store anything
Right.
that we aren't using. The same with the wind, we can store that, and then when we don't have sun or wind, then we can dispatch the battery.
Yeah. So back to the capacity auction. So Maryland, as we all know, is part of the PJM grid. It's 13 different states. All of our electric generation, transmission, and distribution, we're all connected. So what does it mean when you talk about capacity versus, I guess, the energy? And how does that impact rates?
Well, the capacity it's not the same as the energy, because you still got to purchase the energy itself.
Right.
But in the capacity market, for PJM, for example, they'll take your peak load, and you need to be able to cover a percentage of that, no matter what. So that's where you purchase capacity, so that the PJM system knows that it has enough capacity to come online to serve if everybody hit their peak at the same time, basically.
Right. And I think because of that capacity and because of Maryland's demand that has continued to go upward, which is a good thing, by the way. I mean, Maryland's economy is good. I mean, we're an electric company. The demand is good. But I think from a larger PJM grid perspective, there had to be some tough decisions made.
Right.
And a couple of those decisions involved power plants that were set to close in the Baltimore area that were required to stay on. Have you ever seen that?
Occasionally it happens,
Okay.
but it's pretty rare. I've heard of it one other time. It's called reliability must run. So
Right.
they have to stay on for reliability purposes. We did. There's two of them in Maryland, and we were able to make some headway with PJM, as far as that those two assets were not included in the last capacity auction.
Right.
But hopefully they will be in the next one in some manner, because they're not there really to run. They're just there in case we need them.
Right. And so that power that they weren't factored in the last capacity auction. They're going to be factored in this one. So theoretically, that supply will kind of help to bring down prices.
Yeah, or not have them as high as they were going to be.
Makes sense. Makes
Yeah.
sense. So,
But I won't say that they'll be lower than what we paid last time because I don't think they will.
Gotcha. So, in your previous career before you worked at Smeco, you worked at a nuclear plant. Can you
I did.
explain that and explain how important nuclear generation is to not only to Southern Maryland but to the state?
Well, I'm a fan of nuclear power. I think it's safe. It's a lot safer than people think it is, and there's so many regulations that go on around nuclear power. Can there be, I'm sure that there could be issues, but they're very highly regulated, and nuclear power is clean energy.
Right.
It doesn't produce any greenhouse gases. From talking to different people in the community, they like nuclear or they don't, or they're kind of somewhere in the middle. And usually the one thing that I hear from them is, well, it's clean energy, but we still have the fuel disposal issue. So that is an issue for some people. But I think that the industry's sort of worked around that and been able to do some things to, it's not always stored in the reactor. When you don't need the rods anymore, then they have to be taken somewhere. And a lot of the plants have built these above ground concrete casts
Okay.
that hold some of the spent fuel rods. So I'm all in favor of nuclear. I would love it if we were able to build some more here and get into some of this small modular reactors. I don't think they're quite ready yet, but I don't think it'll be long. Hopefully not. And it's definitely, an environmental friendly base load dispatchable.
Right. And
fuel.
I think people understand when we talk about base load, we're talking about, the coldest of the cold days, the hottest of the hot days, the power that is being generated that is there
Mhm.
all the time. And so you worked at Calvert Cliffs, which is
No, that's where Robert worked there.
oh, okay. So
I worked in South Carolina at
you-
a nuclear plant.
okay,
down
you
there.
worked at in South Carolina. So
Yeah.
it's important for people in Maryland to know that much of our baseload generation comes from nuclear.
Right.
And it's right here in our backyard at Calvert Cliffs.
Right.
And Sonia, when you're out at industry events and things, what are you hearing when it comes to new generation and the difficulty in getting it built and why it's so difficult? And how do you kind of see that translating here in Maryland?
Well, I think that, you have to go through, it's not just the county that you're in, but you got to get a lot of different permits, right, to build anything. So it's not just the county. You have to deal with the county, you have to deal with the state, you have to deal with different agencies when you're trying to permit something and get it built. So I think it's important that we look at those things as well. But it's also important. I just lost my train of thought.
No, I think it's important to understand that these projects take time.
Right.
And that it's not an overnight thing. And I think one of the more attractive things that I've been hearing in Annapolis is that some of these plants that have been closed down, trying to retrofit them,
Right.
and getting them back on the grid. And what I mean by that is there's transmission lines that already go into the plants and go out of the plants. However, if we could figure out a way to put a small nuclear reactor there, or if we could change it over from coal to natural gas, that would be a little bit more of an expedited timeline,
Right.
because you're not taking a piece of a piece of land that has no development on it, and you're already developing something that's been developed. So I think that there's going to be incentives along those lines that you're going to see. And I think something that's happening in the state of Maryland that I think is going to happen elsewhere is nuclear energy is going to be incentivized. And what do I mean by that? So Maryland has what's called a renewable portfolio standard, and that RPS is what provides subsidies to solar generators and to wind generators, because utilities like Smecco, we have to purchase a certain amount of solar and wind
Right.
to meet the state law. So one of the bills that is under consideration this year is to incentivize new nuclear.
Right.
So I think they've changed the definition, instead of renewable to green energy. And I think it's a good step. I
Right.
mean, I think there's been a lot of folks who have talked about adding nuclear to the renewable portfolio standard. I think it's not a novel concept.
Right.
However, I think Maryland's lack of generation, combined with this capacity auction that you talked about that is raising prices, and there's no end in sight for these prices to kind of stop rising. I think the legislature has realized that they've got to do something, and they've got to do something to try to stem that tide and try to incentivize new generation here in the state. So,
And that'll be a good thing.
yeah, I think so.
And I know that there's been, when we're talking about permitting, there's also the PJM queue process, and there were some issues there for a while, but I was just reading recently that FERC approved PJM's filing to allow them to try to speed up the queue process.
Excellent.
So, it's weighted different criteria by different criteria. And then if you meet that criteria and you rise to the top of the list, then, you can, I'm not sure that it's not going to get some like pushback from some of the types of generators. But for now, FERC has approved that. So that should help ease things as well.
And I
going
think,
forward.
what the way that I kind of view that is, right now there's like a traffic jam of projects that are waiting to get approved by PJM. And to the extent that that queue can be cleared out and these projects can get greenlit, I think whether it's a new gas plant that's going to get built in Pennsylvania or a new solar plant that's going to get built in Ohio, that's more power going onto the grid, and it should benefit all of us.
Right.
That being said, it does cost money to bring power, 40% at least in Maryland, to bring that power from out of state into the state.
Correct.
And
yes.
that is a fact that is non-debatable.
Right.
And with that, import, costs come with it. And so one of the other issues that we're dealing with when we talk about demand, Southern Maryland is growing. We've got a large number of new houses that are getting built in Southern Maryland. Southern Maryland has been growing over the past couple of decades. However, the new demand that we're starting to see is with data centers. And Sonia, from your perspective, talk a little bit about data centers, why they're coming here, what's the biggest challenge we have in dealing with this new demand.
Right. Well, as well as I do, and probably a lot of other people, that Northern Virginia seems to be the data center capital of the country, or maybe even the world.
Yes.
So I think that some of the transmission companies in Northern Virginia are saying we can't, no more data centers. So now I think that they are looking other places. So we have had quite a bit of activity, and that because
Yes.
you're my intake person for
Sure.
that.
Yeah.
But there's only so much you can handle at once, right? Kind of like you said, you have this in the queue. What did you call it? Like
A traffic jam.
a traffic jam. So
Right.
it's the same thing with data centers. They're calling everybody, and they just want to know when can you get them online so they can start, construction and make sure they have electricity when they're ready, when the data center's ready to go online. So, they ask that when how fast can I get
How,
this?
how much can I get and
And
when can I get
right,
it?
exactly.
And I wish I could have it yesterday.
Yesterday.
Those are the kind of the three themes that we're seeing. And I mean, data centers aren't going away. That's the thing. I mean, we have a massive demand for cloud-based. I'm not going to try to talk above my weight class here, but I know these data centers are very important for the new AI economy that we have. I know that they're very important uh, for the Googles, the Metas, the Amazons,
Right.
and these companies are our largest companies in the country, and so they need to have these facilities. They need to have them sooner rather than later, and they gobble up lots and lots of electricity. What are some of the numbers you've heard so far on these data centers and how much electricity they use?
Um, well, I mean, you hear anywhere from like 300 megawatts to over 1,000 megawatts of electricity that they need. And just for as an example, our all-time peak was hit this past January, and it was 1,036 megawatts is our all-time peak.
Right.
And if you're talking about bringing in data centers, that's going to double that or triple that. And that's what they've seen over in Northern Virginia so far.
Yeah, and I think that's one of the issues that we're wrestling with at SMECO, and what I think our other utilities in Maryland are wrestling with is we have this deficit in generation. We have this new demand coming in, and how do those two things equal out? And I think Southern Maryland is well positioned to attract these data centers because SMECO owns a transmission system. A lot of cooperatives don't own their own transmission lines, and we have a pretty robust 230 kV system. It's a loop that connects all of our service territory. And along that loop, there is available land, some of which is owned by very willing landowners willing to sell that land for development. And I think these data centers are attractive because they're not homes, they're not housing divisions that, require school seats and water and sewer and those types of things. However, they're large buildings that use tremendous amounts of electricity. So I think just so everybody understands, when Sonia talks about when you talked about the demand, our peak was over 1,000 megawatts. That's on the coldest of cold days. Everybody's running their heat pumps. Everybody's taking a shower. All the demands coming on, doubling that with one facility.
Right.
And I think our engineers are working on how do we serve those loads, and it's not just up to us. SMECO has to work with Pepco because our lines are connected with Pepco.
Right.
We have to work with PJM. PJM is our regional grid to make sure that by having that one facility doesn't pull more power away from keeping the lights on for our regular homeowners
Right.
around the service territory.
Right.
Are you, based on some of your discussions with other co-op presidents, Sonia, do you see a lot of this type of development happening across the country?
Yes. I've seen it. They've reached down into even Southern Virginia now, not just
Northern Virginia.
Northern Virginia. I've heard from other co-op CEOs that they have really good working relationship with the hyperscaler or whoever the developer is of the data center, that they understand, at least this one particular one understands the way co-ops work, prefers to deal with co-ops, and just they're in the community trying to make the community better as well. So that was one good success story down in Mecklenburg.
Oh yeah, that was Virginia.
Yeah, South Virginia, Southern Virginia, but yeah, every time I go somewhere, that's a topic of discussion. I was at a conference a couple weeks ago, and I moderated a panel talking about data centers.
Right.
So it's everywhere.
Yeah,
It's
and I think that's what we're going to continue to debate in Annapolis over the next month and a half or so, before the end of session. And I'm not sure exactly where it's all going to fall right now, but I believe in the rest of my career here at Smecco is going to be dealing with these data center developments, and I think Smecco has been very forward looking in investing into our infrastructure, especially our transmission infrastructure that can support these types of facilities. And I don't think back in 2013, 2012, 2011, when we were building our 230 kV system, that we necessarily envisioned this,
right.
but it was our responsibility to make sure that we were ready and that we were make those investments needed to improve reliability, and most importantly to have that resiliency of our transmission system. If we would have a failure during one part of it, that we could reroute that power
Right.
and get it to the rest of our service territory. That loop, I'm not an engineer, nor am I smart enough to be an engineer, but I do understand when you have a loop and you have one part of it that's not working, you can isolate it and get
Go
everybody
around.
else back
Yes.
on. So
Yes.
that was a really big investment for us. The Southern Maryland Reliability Project is what we
Yes.
called it, and it was a big deal.
How
But
long did that take? I can't remember.
so I think it was energized in 2013. I know we were building it we started permitting, I believe, in 2009
Yeah.
ish. And it was a number of years of construction, but that included, if you remember, we built a line. We dug it under the Patuxent River
Right.
from Calvert to St. Mary's County, and one of the most engineering feats that I've ever seen. Where it's a mile deep, the river there,
Yeah.
and we were able to go under the river and come up. And I'll never forget, the driller said, "If you can pound a tobacco stick on the other side, and I'm going to hit that stick." And he didn't do that, thankfully. But that was the level of expertise that we had, and it was a really really fun project to work on.
Yeah. Do you want to tell the viewers why we had to put that under the river?
Sure.
What happened?
Well, I know that.
That might not have been why, but Super Bowl Sunday.
Yeah, there was a Super Bowl in the late '90s, wasn't it, or early 2000s?
I think it was early 2000s because I was working here.
Yeah, so it was early 2000s, Super Bowl Sunday, cold, and we had a line, a smaller voltage line that was buried under the river. It was like on the floor of the river,
Right.
and that river crossing failed. And it was Super Bowl Sunday, and there was a lot of scrambling at Smecco because we had to try to figure out how to bring power from the north in Calvert County to get it to get the substations hot in the Solomons area
Right.
and the lower Calvert area, and we were pushing it.
Right.
And so I think that issue really brought into focus the need for this project,
For the loop.
for the
Yeah.
loop.
Mhm.
And I think it was a very difficult project. I mean, it was over $100 and some million.
Right.
You were CFO at the time,
Right.
and I know how much of a investment that was for us.
Right.
But it was the right thing to do. We dealt with a lot of community concerns with it, but we tried to work with them as best we could. And now the polls and things are just kind of part of the landscape, in my opinion. Others may disagree,
Right.
but it's all for reliability. It's all for us. It's Smecco.
Right. And speaking of additional generation, if we build new plants, then we're going to need to build new transmission lines as well. So that's all needs to be part of the process.
Yeah, that another problem that is being wrestled with in Annapolis is there are over like 30 some bills dealing indirectly or directly with a new transmission line that has been proposed for Northern Maryland.
Right.
It goes from a power plant in Pennsylvania, it goes through Northern Maryland over to Northern Virginia to help serve the data center load. And there is a organized, well-funded effort to stop that transmission line. And, it's needed, but On the other hand, there's folks who really don't like it. And so I think legislators, as they try to figure out how to incentivize new generation, how to keep electricity prices low, how to deal with this transmission line, it's a lot of challenges that are going to have to get worked out over the next month and a half.
Yep. And over the next 5 to 10 years.
Well, definitely over the next 5 to 10 years. But as I say, Sonia, I know this is a topic that we deal with pretty much every day. And I know you have had long discussions with the board, our board of directors, about this. So I know that this is something that SMECO is very much front of mind for us.
Right, it is. Yes.
So,
Well, thank you for the conversation.
well, it was great, as always. Always enjoy it.
Yeah, me too.